So what is REV11 licensing all about? Well, essentially what it is, and all it is a mechanism that was implemented for distributing and installing product keys. That's it. Okay, it doesn't change licensing in other ways. It does, of course, because of that, require secure connections to our license servers from your license servers only. Not the individual systems that make up your installations, just your license server systems. Those license server systems essentially occasionally contact our Synergy, what we call the Synergy License Web Service. And they do so to essentially verify, do you have anything for me? Do you have any new keys? Do you have any updated keys? That kind of thing. That communication is completely secure. It involves outbound traffic only from a single point within your network, which is your license server, to a single point in our network, or on the internet, in fact, which is the license web service. That communication is secured and encrypted via standard HTTPS. So the communication is on port 443. So it's no different to you connecting to your bank from a browser. It's HTTPS protocol end to end. And this is not happening very often. It's happening periodically, fairly infrequently most of the year, and we'll talk about what those particular frequencies and cadence is a little bit later in the presentation. What is important for you to understand is that once the keys have been delivered to your system, there really is no change to the way that your local licensing implementation works. If you're on a Windows environment, then your license server service on some Windows machine somewhere is still serving licenses to any Windows clients on that network. And if you're on a Unix or a Linux system, then the SynD process that's running on that machine is still responsible for serving licenses to the processes on those machines. And those processes do not require internet access for licensing at any time. Again, to reiterate, this is just about the license server process, the SynD process, or the SynLM service on Windows, periodically contacting the internet for the purpose of accessing any new keys that may be available. So this is kind of a high-level summary of what that looks like in reality. So on the left-hand side of the slide, we have the Synergex infrastructure, the bottom left being infrastructure in our office with our customer services team, and our licensing portal in our website, or more accurately in our resource center. And all of this is driven, as many of our internal processes are, by Salesforce ultimately. That includes the resource center is driven from there. All of the licensing information is in there, and so on. So customer services are setting information up in the Salesforce licensing system. You get to interact with that information by viewing information in the licensing portal on the resource center, and there's a certain amount of interaction you can do in that portal as well. And ultimately, that information is being accessed by the Synergy License Web Service, which is top center there, which is a web service running in Microsoft's Azure cloud. On the right-hand side of the scenario is your infrastructure. So whether that be a Unix or a Linux server with terminals and the SynD process running, or whether it be a Windows license server system or service on some Windows machine running the SynD or the SynLM license service, that server is also periodically, perhaps I should have drawn the arrow here in a dotted line, because this is not a permanent thing. Again, it's an infrequent thing. The communications between the client and the license server is as normal, and then we should really have a dotted line here signifying, this periodic touch base. About the license web service itself, as I mentioned already, it's hosted in Microsoft Azure. It's written in .NET, not that that matters. The URL of the license service is and always will be https:/licensing.synergex.com. So if you do have any firewall configuration to do to facilitate outbound access from the licensed server, then that is the DNS entry that ideally, if your firewall supports it, and almost all should or do, configuring rules based on a DNS name, then that's the recommended strategy. Currently, the IP address is 104.40.28.133, the IPv4 address. We will do everything we can to ensure that that does not change, but we can't guarantee it forever. So if you do use the IP address, we will, if we become aware that it needs to change for any reason, we will do our best to inform you of that ahead of time. But it's kind of, it is under our control to a certain extent, but who knows what may happen in the future. So if you can, use licensing.synergex.com. The IP address has been the same as far as I know. I checked it the other day, and it's still the same today. We will do everything to make sure that is still the case. And your license servers must be able to contact this particular IP address, or ideally via its DNS name, via HTTPS. There is a mechanism that allows you to proxy that traffic through a proxy server if necessary. And in fact, one of our customers has taken advantage of that, in that they're unable to do internet access from the production system, but they can proxy the system through a VPN to their site and then out to the internet from there. So there's all kinds of different mechanisms you can use to facilitate the communication if that's a problem. Verifying connectivity. If you've got everything up to date and installed with the REV11 tools, then there's a utility called LMCheck that you can use. And as you can see there, if you run LMCheck, the first thing it tells you is successfully contacted the Synergy licensing web service. And some additional information there. If you just want to check that you can get to the service from Windows or any system with a browser, you could just use the browser and hit up the URL, and you will simply get a very simple response from that GET request saying licensed services are running. That's an indication that you've been able to contact the service as well. And if you're in a command line environment, then most systems have something, either the wget utility or some very close equivalent, which essentially is doing a web get. So you can use that to retrieve basically the same thing. You're doing the exact same thing as you're doing here from the command line. So that's a quick way of just verifying that you can access that service from that particular point on the network. In terms of polling frequency, so there are really two kinds of operations that we talk about when it comes to REV11 licensing. There's polling and there's synchronizing or syncing. So a poll involves your server, your server contacting the license service and saying, "Hi, I'm here. Do you have anything for me?" If there is anything for them, then that becomes what we call a sync. And then those licenses are downloaded and installed and so on. The polling frequency, as you can see from the table, really depends on where you're at in the life cycle of your keys. So if you install a brand new system, then as usual, the system goes into a 14-day grace period. You have that time to get your licensing configured. Nothing changes there. And what's happening is the license server will go into an hourly polling mechanism because it's expecting we've just been installed and configured. Presumably, we're going to get keys pretty soon. So it checks once an hour to see if those keys are available. Once you get those keys installed, and if none of those keys are within a 30-day period or within a 30-day time frame to the expiration of any of those keys, then the polling period drops back to 7 days. So literally, the only overhead of this most of the year is one TCP/IP or one HTTPS request every 7 days. Now, bear in mind, if you type in the URL to any typical website, that's typically hundreds of HTTP requests. So, one request every 7 days is a minute amount of traffic and overhead being caused by this thing. Once you start getting closer to any key, so if there's a single key on the system that has an expiry date that becomes within 30 days, or in the 9 to 30 day region, then the ping the poll starts happening once a day, in anticipation of, presumably this is going to get resolved soon, but it's not that critical right now. If it gets within 3 to 8 days, we drop down to every 4 hours. And if it gets below 3 days, then again, we revert to the once an hour, because we're really expecting keys to come in at any point, really, really soon. So that's how the interval works, and that helps you understand what the overhead of this thing is. What happens if a poll fails? So obviously networking can go wrong, things can change, configurations can change, firewalls can change, and so on. So if we don't receive a poll from you, now, and again, to reiterate, our service never contacts you. You always contact us based on that polling frequency, or based on a system admin initiating a poll. We'll talk about that in a few minutes' time. So what happens if a poll fails? Well, if we don't hear from you within 30 days, we start to sit up and listen and think, something wrong here? Bearing in mind, we would have expected within a 30-day period to have heard from you 4 times, every 7 days at least. So if we don't hear from you for 4 consecutive weeks, or accurately a 30-day period, then an email notification is generated from the license service, and that email goes to our customer service team, and it also goes to your license admins. So, like you've been able to do for a while, certain people in the resource center, and I believe you have the ability to control who those people are. If not, I apologize, speak to your account manager or customer service, and they'll help you with that. But your license admins, those designated people who can see and interact with licensing in the resource center, will also receive that email to tell them, just to give you a heads up, it looks like something's not quite right here. Those notifications will get repeated, and obviously we treat them different kind of priorities after 60 days and 90 days. So there's plenty of built-in warning when things aren't going right, and that warning starts at 30 days by default. As you'll see at the bottom of the slide, you do have the option to reduce that cadence if you wish. You can make it either a 10, 20, 30-day cycle or a 20, 40, 60-day cycle. I believe you still have to contact customer service to switch that frequency. It's not something that's under your direct control, but we can change that frequency for you if you wish. And again, possible future web portal option. I apologize, I didn't check if that's been done already, so apologize if it has. If we don't hear from you within 90 days, so if all of those warnings fail, and by the way, we're not just going to get those emails and go, there's a problem. We're expecting to hear from you, and if we don't hear from you, we're going to be contacting you right from the 30-day period. And we're probably going to be sending emails and saying, is this license still in use? Is there a problem here? Something you want to look at? So, we'll be on it as soon as we start receiving those messages. But if it ever is allowed to get to a 90-day period, then your license server, Cindy, re-enters what's called a 14-day forced expiration period. And this is very similar to the initial 14-day grace period, whereby any runtimes that are certainly the REV11 runtimes and compilers are going to be issuing that temporary licensing message that you see when you first install a system and don't have keys. When you run the runtime, you get that 2-second delay and that information message about licensing. You'll start to see that again. And the compiler and runtime, like I say, they report. That's what I'm talking about. The compiler and runtime report that communication problem. Also, if you use any of the license management tools like LMU, for example, you're going to see warning messages in there that tell you that there's an issue and things are in the expiration period. These messages are recorded at every stage in the system log on your system and in the SynD log files if you've got license service logging enabled. Obviously, if after the end of that 14-day period things have still not been resolved, then the licensing is going to stop serving keys to the processes that request them. What can you do from a system admin point of view to poll and synchronize? There are times when you might want to take this under your control and tell the system to go and do a poll right now. Primarily, that's going to be, there's a couple of scenarios where depending on the sequence of things that you do, your system might be in a more than 30 days, so it's only going to check every 7 days, but you might have requested an upgrade or something like that. So you might not want to wait that 7-day period. Or if you had a networking issue and you want to verify that everything's working again, you've resolved the issue. So there's a couple of ways of doing it. You can use the LMU command line utility, LMU-sync. So that will go out and do a poll and do a synchronize if necessary. And also the SynConfig utility, if you're running on Windows, has a new button on the licensing page saying synchronize. And as you can see, there's also additional information out there, as there is in the LMU output as well, that tells you when the last poll attempt was, when the last contact, which would be the successful poll, when the last synchronize happened, i.e. when were keys last exchanged, and when is it going to retry. So there's all the information you need is out there and available to you. Polling downloads all the keys every time, but SynD will only apply any changes that come down. So if it receives the same keys it's already got, nothing's going to happen in terms of the license server. And that's important because just bear in mind that last sync date might not be the same as your last poll date. So that again, the last poll date is the last time the last poll date is the last time it made contact, and the last sync date essentially is the last time it received changes. So we have had a few support calls about why is the sync date not changing, and that's the reason why. When you do a sync, if there are changes, then you will see the details of those changes as well. If there are no changes, you don't see this. But as you can see, it says keys for the following products were installed, and you get a list of the keys. You see the same output in the window in SynConfig if you're making the changes there. So if you've just done a new install, actually a new install is slightly different. There's a slightly different process to this. But if you do a sync manually and keys are pulled down, you will visually see that being informed to you. Where is REV11 licensing supported? Okay, so REV11 licensing is supported on Unix, Linux, and Windows systems. So basically everywhere apart from OpenVMS, where clearly we use the OpenVMS pack system. So by default, all Synergy 11 installs automatically built in, nothing you can do about it, use REV11. So Synergy 11 and REV11 go hand in hand. And if you want to opt into REV11 licensing to take advantage of all this automation, obviously you don't have to install annual keys anymore. So you can get a license update package. We tend to refer to it as LUP, yet another TLA for us all to remember. So the license update package or upgrade package, I'm not actually sure which it is, which is available for some earlier versions of Synergy. To be able to use the license upgrade package, and these requirements have changed slightly recently. You need to be with a version 11 supported operating system. So your operating system needs to be able to support version 11, but you can have a Synergy install of 953B, 10.1, or 10.3, and any of the variants thereof. So if you have one of those qualifying systems, then you need to opt into REV11 licensing and using the license upgrade package. Basically, everything will work the way I've already described, with one exception, which is the compiler and runtime in those older versions do not have the code to report the connectivity issues. So if the licensing environment ever gets so far as to going into the forced expiration period, you will not see those 2-second delays and the warning messages on the runtime when you run up an application, because the older compilers and runtimes in those versions did not have that code at the time, and they're not replaced by LUP. Typical workflows. So let's talk about some typical workflows and things that you might have to sort of understand. Although, I've got several scenarios here, but there's kind of a theme running through them, and actually it sounds a lot more complex than it actually is. So here's a workflow for, let's say you're doing a new system installation. And there are variations on some of these workflows, but generally the ideal scenario is that if you're going to be installing a new system, place the order for that new system ahead of time, as you probably already did. So you place that new order with Synergex. You need to provide the information about the product details that you want to order, the different products, how many keys, and so on. But there's no need to provide a registration string to us anymore. That part of the process is automated. What happens when you do that is our customer service team create that order in our licensing system in the Salesforce database, and that information is now available to the license web service. And what they do is they will generate and issue, generally through email. You can also see these in the licensing portal once a new license is created. A 4-character alphanumeric install code. And that 4-character code, excuse me, is basically all you need to get the system up and running once you've installed the software. Your job is to install the system, configure licensing the way you always did during the installation. In most cases, the Windows and Unix installations prompt you, oh, licensing isn't initialized. Do you want to be a client or a server on Windows, or enter your licensing information on Unix? You put that information in, and once you've done the install, you can then apply that install code that you've received. So not during the actual installation, but you do the installation exactly as you always did. And then an additional step afterwards is, once you've received that 4-digit code, you go and apply it. And you can do that again either in the SynConfig utility on Windows, or you can use the LMU command line with LMU-install and enter the code. Excuse me. And what that does is essentially it contacts the license web service. It uploads the data of the license, so the licensee name and the registration string, in conjunction with the 4-digit authorization code, which is used to hook it up to a license that's waiting in the system on your account. And then product keys are generated, downloaded, and installed. So that single operation of using SynConfig or using LMU-install both provides the information to us that you used to manually have to provide, the licensee name and the registration string, and it downloads the keys and installs them for you. So that's all you need to do to get licensing fully configured and keys applied to that system. Here's an example. Again, I hope this hasn't changed. This is a couple of years old screenshot, but I'm sure it still looks something like this. As you can see, this is an example of the email you might receive after you've placed an order for a system. And as you can see, the install code is listed there, as well as the unique license name from a license code from our system, and the licensee name. This is the licensee name that I provided when I placed the order. It doesn't necessarily have to be exactly the same as the one you enter. It will upload the one you've entered when it first does the sync, when you apply the install code. Examples of LMU output. So LMU output has changed a little bit. So if you do have any utilities or software that parses this information, then you might have a little bit of work to do. The top part is pretty much similar to what it was before, but you will notice that the registration strings are now significantly longer than they used to be. So if you do have any tools that process that or store that anywhere for any reason, then you would have a little bit of work to do there. And obviously you can see some new information here that's telling you the status of the REV11 environment. So polling is on, and here's the last dates and all of that kind of thing. And this is what it would look like immediately after a brand new install. before doing the LMU-install to provide the keys. If you are a client install, then you do see the new, on Windows, then you do see the new registration string, but you don't see the polling details on the client system. They're only visible on the server. Here's what SynConfig looks like after a new Synergy 11 install. Then obviously you can see in the licensing screen there's a few new options. There's this whole license synchronization section here with the definition. Again, this was a screenshot taken before the synchronization, before the install code was applied. That's why it's saying registration string not found, because the license service doesn't know anything about this reg string. As soon as we do that LMU-install, or as soon as we hit the apply install code button and go through that process, then that error will go away and things will synchronize. So some changes there. There's also some changes in the advanced screen on the licensing configuration, which I believe, yeah, we've got here. Primarily, new format for the registration string, and we've got this new license synchronization area here. So this is where you can specify whether proxies are being used. So by default, if your Windows operating system is using a proxy server to get to the internet, then we will use the same proxy server. You can disable that if you wish, or if you know you don't need a proxy server, although there's really no reason to do so. If Windows isn't using one, then we won't use one. And you can also manually configure a proxy if you want to provide that information. Perhaps there's been a proxy provided specifically for this purpose rather than general internet access. Then you can configure the name or IP address and the port of that proxy server in here. Also, this section is new. So this allows you to update the contact information. The contact info is that info that the compiler and the runtime, again, when a system is in 14-day grace or forced expiration on version 11, then that message that's displayed with the, you have no licenses, you're within 14 days, please contact. By default, it always used to display our information. If you wish, you can check this box and put your own details in here. So you can have your own name and address and phone numbers and URLs and email addresses, whatever it is you need, so that the end users will see your information, not ours. Internet communication web proxy, we already talked about that. The command line equivalent, by the way, is on the LMU command line. You can use the new -pp, and you specify the proxy server DNS name or IP address, followed by a colon and the port number. So that's how you configure the proxy access on the command line. Okay, I guess I forgot these slides were here. So there's just an example of using that contact info to update the information that's displayed. Again, you can also do it via the LMU utility. To do it with LMU, you essentially put the information you want to use into a text file, and then you use the new LMU-contact and name the text file that contains that contact information. And that will implement that change in that command line environment for you. And again, this does require Synergy 11, not just the REV11 upgrade package. Applying the install code. So here's how you actually go ahead and apply the install code once you've installed the system and you want to actually hook things together and get your keys. So you basically, you can either use LMU-install and you type in the code, and hopefully you see install code applied. But these keys are one-time only use. And I apologize, I can't remember whether they're case sensitive or not. I suspect they are, but we'll have to get back to you about that. LMU-install the code. You could see something like registration string could not be transmitted, install code invalid, already used or expired. So they are single use. Once you've used it, you can't reuse it, and they are only valid for 14 days. If something got messed up and you have to reconfigure something, you can regenerate and install code for an existing key in the resource center. And I think we'll talk about that in a little while. Here's what things look like if you do when you do your apply install code. Again, whether you do it on the command line with LMU-install or whether you do it with the SynConfig utility, you will see the output from LMU. And this is what it looks like when you first apply that install code. Hopefully everything works fine, and you can see all of the information. You'll notice the last poll attempt, the invalid whatever the invalid registration string message has gone away, and now we have actual keys that have been downloaded and installed. And obviously our system is still just exactly the same as it was before. We're still in a 14-day grace period for a new installation for any other product. So if you only installed a subset of the products, again, just like it always did, everything else will carry on working for the balance of that 14-day period. There is something new in the REV11 world as well that's called fuzzy version matching. Love the name. And this basically comes into play whenever you have a current ALM or a current subscription license. And the change is that you can basically use whatever keys you have to run whatever versions of your software. So it's not critical that you have, that you get your version 11 keys as soon as or before you install your version 11 environment, for example. So you can run, well, actually, that's not true. The reverse. If you can run V9, V10, and V11 apps with your V11 keys. And also, if you're wanting to do testing of a new version, then, for example, doing beta testing with a new version doesn't require new keys, because we will see that you have a valid key for that product and you have a valid subscription or a valid ALM. So we know you have the right to run that version. So we will allow you to do so. If ALM products expire, then current and earlier versions will continue to run. Versions released after the ALM has expired will not run. Okay, you will notice a new key on your system if you're in an ALM environment, and that key is called ALM, and you will notice it has an expiry date. Okay, that expiry date is not used to prevent any products from, prevent any of your existing version products from running. It's used to implement what we call the fuzzy up logic that allows you to run later versions with earlier version of keys. So if ALM expires, that license essentially, if you're in an ALM scenario, your right to run the software ends with the version that's in place when your ALM expires. And this expiry date on that ALM key ensures that you can't install the next version, and do that fuzzy matching. Obviously, expired subscription products are expired. The product will not run with any version at that point. Nothing new there. The licensing web portal itself, again, just to provide a little bit more information about it, does allow you to view and manage licenses. It's part of the new resource center, so it's Synergex resourcecenter.force.com is its actual URL, or you can click on the resource center link at in the top bar of the synergex.com website. The way you get there is you first click on products and then click on licenses, and then if you're a license admin, you will see a manage licenses button. Obviously, this does allow, you can get to the products area without a login, but as the little key on the icon suggests there, you do have to log in to get to the licenses area. So you'll be prompted to do so if you click on it. The current functionality is that you can view all of your licenses that are assigned to your organization. You can view individual licenses in detail. And you can also generate new install codes for a license. So if you're having to reinstall the system for any reason, excuse me, then you can go into the license portal, hit the give me a new install code, and again you will receive an email with that code. The code will also be displayed on the web page in the portal. And I think here's what the views look like. So here's a view of the Synergex consulting organization, just as an example customer, with all of the individual licenses that are assigned to that organization, listed with their type of license, their whether they're dev licenses or traditional licenses or subscriptions, the platform, the end date of the license. If it's REV11, you can see just peeking out from the behind there is the last sync date. And this is the screen you will see if you click on one of those particular licenses to see the full detail and see all of the products and versions and number of users and so on. And you'll notice also here there's the generate install code button if you need to do a reinstall for that license. When you generate the install code, all you're basically going to see is it tells you that you're about to generate a temporary install code for the license. You hit continue, you see a success message. And I believe if we go back, the install code, I think it's displayed in here somewhere. I may be wrong. Maybe it appears, maybe it's not there anymore, but for sure you will receive an email notification with that information in there. Let's just look at a few, very briefly, look at a few other scenarios. So we've already discussed what happens with a new V11 system, that we looked through that process. Here's just a few additional scenarios. So doing a Synergy version upgrade when you don't have REV11 installed, taking an existing V9 or V10 system and adding REV11 licensing to it. Installing a new V9 or 10 system with REV11 licensing, doing a Synergy version upgrade once you have REV11 licensing. These are all sort of very common scenarios. And then we'll talk about annual ALM subscription and change of entitlements and so on. So fairly quickly, if you're doing a Synergy version upgrade, so what we're saying here is we're taking an existing system with a prior version that's already installed and licensed and set up. So it's running a 953B or a version 10 something, but you don't have any REV11 licensing installed. The preferred flow is, again, tell customer services that you're going to be doing a version 11 upgrade. So request that they upgrade the license to version 11. What Synergex will then do is process that upgrade in the system, prepare the license for polling. So there's a switch they turn on against that license to say, we are now expecting REV11 license polling for this license. And without that switch being thrown, that polling won't happen. And then once that process is complete, you will see a upgrade complete email that is sent back to you. And then you can go ahead and install the version 11 upgrade. And if you do things in this sequence, then as soon as you do the version 11 upgrade, things will automatically synchronize, keys will be generated and downloaded and installed, and there's nothing additional you have to do. There is an alternate flow, excuse me, that if you just go ahead and upgrade the system to version 11 before telling us, then our customer services will receive an email that essentially is an upgrade notification that an upgrade has been detected that we don't know about, and they will in the background process that upgrade and send you that email. But things are going to carry on working. Once you've received that email, you can then force a sync or wait for the next poll to happen, which is is going to be fairly quickly in that case because it hasn't got any keys, so it's going to be polling hourly. Existing V9 or V10 system, if you want to add REV11 licensing to it. So basically we're saying you've got a system that's running 953B and somewhere between there and 1033G, which was the last version 10 release. And remember, it has to be, your operating system has to be capable of supporting Synergy 11. Then if you want to do that, you simply install the license upgrade package. Synergex will receive a notification that upgrade package has been installed, and go through the normal process. That process will send the upgrade complete email, and you can then force a sync or wait for the next poll, and then everything will synchronize up. New V9 or V10 system where REV11 licensing has already been installed. So you've gone to REV11 with the upgrade package in the past, and now you're upgrading to Synergy 11. You're installing a new system with REV11. I'm sorry, I misread the title. So a new V9 or 10 system with REV11 licensing. Again, best process is the process needs to be order the license ahead of time. So order your new V9 or V10 license. We will create the order in the system. You will receive the install code email, and you can use that install code email as soon as you install that new system, and licensing will immediately sync up. Synergy upgrade with existing REV11. This is the one I tried to start talking to a moment ago. So this is saying you've got an existing version 9 or 10 system that you've already applied the license update package, so you're already running REV11 licensing. Then again, you've got a couple of options. The first option is the smoother option. So if you tell us ahead of time that you're going to be upgrading that license, then customer services will process that upgrade, tag the license as now a version 11 license. You'll receive that upgrade complete email, and you just install version 11, and automatically things will synchronize. And after your installation, if you look at the LMU output, you should have your version 11 keys. Again, the alternate flow is if you just install version 11 ahead of time without telling us, then we will receive a fuzzy matching notification telling us that you've done the upgrade that we didn't know about, and we will do that in the system, and you'll receive the email, and you can force a sync or wait for the next poll. Again, the best thing is tell us ahead of time, but if you can't or won't, it's not going to stop things running. It's just going to put that delay in there between when you do the install and when you actually get your keys. And again, subject to weekends and things like that. ALM processing with REV11 licensing. So again, once you've got REV11 licensing, you will still receive your ALM worksheet to work through and go through, and you have the same choice you always have. You either renew those ALMs or you don't renew those ALMs. If you do, you'll get a new ALM key, and again, remember that has that expiry date that is mentioned. So as you extend your ALM, you'll get a new ALM key that reflects the expiry date of your ALM agreement. And again, that's purely there to restrict access to future versions, not the new version. If you don't renew ALM, no keys will change. Products released after that ALM will not work. Annual subscription processing with REV11 licensing. Again, it's you have a binary choice. You either renew your subscription or you don't. And if you basically as part of the process of renewing your subscription, we will update that information in the licensing database. And the next time your system polls, which presumably you're renewing your subscription when it's getting towards expiring. So it's probably, I don't know what you guys do, but it might be within the 30-day period, let's say. So it's polling fairly frequently, so probably daily. You would expect those keys to be there within a day if you're within that 30-day period. Or obviously you can go out there and force it with a manual poll if you wish. Again, if you don't renew the subscription, we're not going to update any keys. You're not going to get any new keys, and basically your product will stop working. And again, no change there. REV11 doesn't change that behavior. REV11 is just about the delivery of keys. So polling, once that happens, polling will continue for 7 days after the licenses are all terminated. After that 7-day period, if there is no renewal, then it will stop polling completely. And obviously, if you want to reinstate that system for any reason, then you would have to manually intervene in the same way you always did. The whole way we manage the licensing environment with kill strings and all of that kind of thing to reset the environment and reconfigure licensing, all of that's still basically the same. So that's what you would have to do in that scenario. Another scenario is change of entitlement. So you contact customer services, or through whatever means you request a change to the product keys. You're adding a new product. You're adding an XF server license to an existing license, or you're increasing the number of users on a runtime or something like that. Then you contact customer service. We apply the change in the licensing system. And again, the next time your system polls, keys are generated, downloaded and installed, and you don't need to take any specific action. Again, if you want to force a poll to get those keys ahead of time, chances are chances are most of the year you're in a 7-day cycle, and you may want those new keys faster than that. So again, once you know that change has been made in the system, and you can see that in the portal, of course, then you can do your LMU minus sync and cause those keys to be installed. Reinstalling existing systems. So if you need to replace the license server, for example, if the hardware has changed in a significant way, or you've moved it to another system. So any significant hardware changes will place the system into a 14-day forced expiration period. It will not stop the license server running, and you have that 14-day period to contact customer services to process a reinstall and to receive and apply your new install code. The new system from a backup or a VM clone, essentially the recommended process is contact us ahead of time, place the order for the new system, receive your new install code. And the command you can see on the screen here is assuming you've got a licensed base image, essentially. But obviously, things are going to stop working if the hardware changes or whatever, if the environment changes significantly enough. So this is the process by which you can apply a new install code to an existing license. So LMU minus R, the new licensee, minus NS minus install, and the new code, and that will apply that new license to that cloned system. REV11 licensing general. What if internet access is not allowed? Well, this whole environment does rely on that one tiny packet every week, most of the year. If that is not possible, contact your account manager, and we'll have to have a discussion about what the best way to address that scenario is. Hasn't been a problem yet. How is backup license server affected? Backup license server is just a mirror of the main licensing environment. So if activated, backup license servers don't do any polling. The polling happens from the main license server, and the backup license server just mirrors whatever the main license server does. So no real change there. And I already mentioned, do kill strings LMU minus K, do they still work the same way? And the answer to that is yes. Additional capabilities. Bear in mind, this is really primarily for ISVs. Bear in mind, Synergex does technically have the ability to kill product keys or licenses from systems. This is not something we would ever do under our own direction. But from an ISV, if you have end user systems or end user installations that you want to stop working for whatever reasons, assuming you have the contractual and legal right to do so, then, if you contact customer service and start a dialogue, this does require special approval at Synergex. This is not something that customer services are just going to do for you if you request it. There's going to be a whole discussion involving some very senior people, but it is technically possible. So ISVs could use this to disable customer systems. Again, it's not going to be immediate. It will be subject to current polling, which chances are is 7 days. And so on. And another thing to be aware of is that if your systems generate any license count exceeded notifications, we do get notified of that. Currently, at this time, you do not. But we do receive notifications saying, "Oh, this particular system just tried to exceed, just got a problem, just got an error because it exceeded its number of runtime keys or its number of compiler keys or whatever it happens to be." So that information is available to us, but not you guys right now. And I believe, if you feel you would like that information available, then weigh in and let us know that, because that's something we were considering making a change to. Okay, so we've got 9 minutes left for any questions. I'm happy to take any questions. I may not personally answer the questions. I do have several colleagues with me on the line, so we can hopefully address any questions that you may have. Does anybody have a question?
We'll start with the question that you had, Steve. I did receive behind-the-scenes confirmation that install codes are not case sensitive.
Okay, good. I didn't think they were, but something in the back of my mind, I wasn't quite sure. Good. That's awesome.
And now at this point, everyone in the audience should be able to unmute themselves and ask a question out loud or post something in the question panel or the chat area. We do have a comment from Roseanne. Clarification, if applying an install code fails because the licensee name specified during installation does not match what was specified when the order was placed, you can correct the licensee name in the web portal. So that's handy.
Okay, I apologize. I did not realize that. Okay, so good news. So yes, okay. So like I mentioned, when you place the order, you do provide a licensee name, but not a registration string. I thought it just updated based on the install code, but thank you for that clarification, Roseanne. So make sure you get those licensee names right, but if not, then it's not the end of the world because you can fix it in the portal. Thank you for that.
And I guess I can chime in for a second. If you have any questions after the webinar, you can reach out to us in developer support at synergex.com. We're happy to help.
Yeah, and like I say, we're here to help. So if you do have other questions or other things pop into your mind for a few hours or days from now, get in touch with your account manager at Synergex. We can get a call together to go over anything you might need more information about. Happy to do that. So yeah.
I guess for now we can start to wrap things up.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for all that information, Steve. And thanks again to everyone out there for joining us. And just a quick pitch for other remote events that we have in the works. On February 25th, our CEO, Bill Mooney, will be leading a webinar on working with multi-generational teams. So I'm going to go ahead and post a link to register for that webinar in the chat. Let's see. And then keep an eye out for upcoming conference news. We are planning our virtual conference that will take place in May. So just check your inboxes for information on that. But again, this recorded webinar will be posted on YouTube, so you can always refer back to this information once we're done today. So again, thank you for joining, and we hope to see you in a future webinar.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.